Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
This sponsorship break brought to you by the Ascend Mastermind. In the midst of complexity of leading your business, new challenges are introduced almost every single day. It can leave you feeling disorganized, distracted, and downright confused. It doesn't have to be this way. We believe everyone should have the ability to reach their full potential in business and life. Make the time to invest in your business because it's time to kill the grind and find new flexibility and success. You don't have to do it alone. The Ascend Mastermind Peer Advisory Board will give you access to other like-minded individuals to share your challenges with and hold you accountable. It will help you move from stagnant to growth and give you more freedom in your business and life. To learn more how to apply, go to chargepodcast.com and click on the link, The Ascend Mastermind. Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again this week for another great guest and another great podcast. I can't believe we're already in the fourth quarter of this year. Now, the question is, we may not have achieved all of our goals, and this is the Charge Podcast, but that's okay. The question I want you to really do as you hear our speaker today, I want you to get some clarity on what you want to move forward with the rest of this year and then going in the next year. And I think we're going to help you with that with our speaker today, because he is Matthew Turner. He's a British author, and he wrote his latest book, Beyond the Pale, on the back of interviewing hundreds of successful entrepreneurs, authors, investors, and thought leaders. As well as writing his own books, Matthew ghostwrites both articles and books for other successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders, in between spending time with his two children. Matthew, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Gary, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
I'm excited to get in your discussion. As I was telling you offline, I looked at your website, looked at your new book that you had come out, and I've told you I've written a couple fables too, and we're going to really dig into that. But before we do, we gave just a little bit of glimpse. You have two children, but tell us who Matthew Turner is and kind of your story to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am based here in the north of England, a little Yorkshire town called Halifax, and I've basically lived my entire life here. It's crazy to think I spent my teenage years just kind of desperate to leave, but then family, kids, things of that nature, and I'm just finding myself fall in love with this area more and more the older I get. And the other thing, which if you'd have spoken to like teenage me and said, one day you're going to be a writer, he would have been saying, nope, you're a lunatic. And I suppose that's kind of like the journey, really. I always struggled at school with grammar, and I was never the greatest reader, and I struggled with spelling and things of that nature. So I distanced myself. I had this rather fixed mindset that because I struggled and found English hard, I was therefore no good. And therefore, I wanted nothing to do with it. So I wouldn't read as much. I wouldn't write. But I always had this fantastic imagination. Looking back over hindsight, I always had this storytelling aspect to me. And it wasn't until I got into my early 20s that I started to write. First of all, as a form of therapy and journaling. And it just led to my first book, Beyond Parallel, which I published around about 10 years ago now, which is crazy to think. Maybe not quite 10 years, 8 or 9 years ago. It's been a while. And yeah, it just kind of spiraled from there. It began as a form of therapy. It became something I just learned and did more and more, and the craft developed inside me more and more. So I wasn't just a storyteller, but a genuine writer. And I started to learn about the rules of writing, what to do versus what not to do. It eventually led me to leave my job, start working for myself. And I just leaned further and further into the world of writing, first with my own books and then eventually ghostwriting for clients. And that's kind of what I do now with my business. I have my own books and my own articles and my own sort of content, if you will, but I also ghostwrite for other people. As you said, whether it's articles, books, reports, guides, it can form different forms. But yeah, that's kind of how I spend my world now, writing every single day.
I appreciate you sharing it. And you probably noticed I was smiling pretty big when you talked about I was not the best English student and that side. And the reason I was smiling so big is not for you. I felt myself because I can raise my hand for that. And kind of the interesting part that I have is so far up to the 4 books I've wrote, my high school English teacher has been my editor.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah. So it's been kind of interesting. And she knew I wasn't good at grammar then. And she knows I'm still not good at grammar. So Matthew, It's one of those things. Sometimes it's not about the talent you have then. I liked how you said that with that fixed mindset that you had. Instead, you found out there can be a real love to that. And that's really what happens when we really get the channel and follow our passions that we have. So I know this is going to be a great conversation. I can't wait to share it with the audiences out there. But let's start with really, I think from the book that you wrote, you decided to write a fable. So why did you decide to really aim in on entrepreneurs when you wrote the fable?
So here it is in all its glory. Anyone watching the video, there you go, Beyond the Pale. It's crazy to think that the journey started over 4 years ago now. And kind of to just backtrack, like I say, I've had 4 books before this. 3 of them were novels. So my writing passion developed in fiction. Non-fiction was something which I did in order to kind of spearhead my business activities. As soon as I started my business, I committed to this book called The Successful Mistake, where I interviewed 160 odd entrepreneurs about failure and how they overcame it. And in a nutshell, it was that which eventually led to Beyond the Pale. The lessons I learned in The Successful Mistake kind of sent me down this personal development and mindset rabbit hole, which inspired me to write this book, Beyond the Pale. But the reason I wrote a fable is for quite a few years now, I've always wanted to combine these 2 worlds. I always felt like I was a writer with 2 faces, a little bit like Two-Face off of Batman. I had, my fiction, which was kind of my art and the way I expressed myself. And then I had my nonfiction, which was how I kind of taught and educated. And I enjoyed them both in different ways. I enjoyed the nonfiction because it was a way for me to figure out complex problems and get them down on paper. And that's how I kind of figured them out. And it was also a way for me to interview other people and get their stories across and then retell them and to kind of combine them with one another's. So I really enjoyed nonfiction in that sense, whether it was a book or an article or whatever. But I really loved my fiction because it was just a chance for my imagination to go wild. So with my fiction, I would always create something that I hoped would help people escape, and it would enlighten them and it would entertain them. And with my nonfiction, I really kind of focused on content that would educate and entertain, but in a different way. So I had this dream of bringing them all together, and I just never knew how it would come about. But then I started reading a few different fables and parables, books like The Alchemist and The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I actually worked on a book, which was a parable called the 90-Day Project. And I wasn't anything to do with the writing aspect. I was just on there to kind of help with the marketing and some of the promotion. But I started to think this is maybe a way for me to combine these 2 passions. And shortly thereafter, I came up with the idea of Ferdinand, who is the lead character in Beyond the Pale. And it didn't take me long to know that this was a book I had to write. Not only because it was something I wanted to do subconsciously for quite some time, combining the nonfiction and fiction loves of mine, but I'd also started to notice on the back of all those interviews for The Successful Mistake, I'd quite often end conversations, and whoever was further down the line than me, I would always ask them, like, what are you reading? I was always interested in the kind of books that they wrote. And I realized that most of them who were, for me, further down the road, that kind of had it a bit more figured out than me, they didn't read the typical nonfiction books that we all see every single day thrown at us online. They read philosophy. They read history. They read autobiographies and biographies. And lo and behold, they read novels. They read fiction. And I'd kind of got into this mindset where I was reading all the time and I was consuming because I was coming across all these nonfiction books, but I was reading the books I felt that I had to read. And the people who I spoke to who were further back than me or on a similar level with me were in the same kind of mindset, reading all these nonfiction books. And they weren't giving themselves permission to read novels. They weren't giving themselves the permission to read maybe the books that they want to, because they had this massive stack of books they felt they had to. Yet the people further down the road, they would say things like, once you've read, 10 of these books, you've kind of read them all. A lot of the times you'll read these nonfiction books and you will get what you need out of them in just 1 or 2 chapters. Whereas when you read a novel or a book on philosophy or history or an autobiography, you're not necessarily getting taught anything, but you're being shared these stories that you can relate to on a different level. And it's forcing you to kind of tap in and asking the questions really in your mind. So you're still learning, but you're learning in a different way. So I wanted to write a fable, not only because it was something I wanted to do, but I felt like more entrepreneurs out there, more people who own their own business, working for themselves, online influencers, whatever you want to call it, they needed to read more novels. They needed to read more fiction. They needed to step away from all the how-to books that they felt they had to read and just escape a little bit, allow themselves to be entertained by a story, and then more subliminally be taught and educated and enlightened, not by having something forced down their throat, follow this 7-step process, whatever it may be, but rather just encourage them to relate their personal circumstances with the characters in the book, to relate their experience with the experiences in the book, start asking different questions, coming at the problem from a different angle. And for me, I've learned more from novels and philosophy books and all these books which we don't give ourselves time to read as entrepreneurs because of this fact, than all the other nonfiction books which I've read, which they teach you some things, but you quite often consume the information and then sit on it and don't do anything with it.
I just love how you kind of framed it up, and really the philosophy, and really for entrepreneurs, that becomes, I think, a real challenge. As I told you, I'm one of those, but really what got my reading going is reading fables and nonfiction books. It really kind of spurred me, because at that time I was reading a few a year, and it really allowed me up that level. And then I decided, even as an author too, that I wanted to go that route, because I felt like more people would pick up those type of books and allow them, within their business, for entrepreneurs themselves, but even their staff then. And that's really how I got started. I was giving away an author's book because I loved how he shared the message. It was a simple message, but it resonated with everyone. And, I don't have a problem saying who it was. John Gordon with the Energy Bus was one of them first ones that I picked up. But then he's become really famous in that side of it, because it allows us to put ourselves into the story.
Exactly. And we all have this affinity with storytelling. I mean, most of us love nothing more than to escape in front of a movie or, binge on a series on Netflix to escape a little. But it's also just a way for us to, tap into ourselves a little bit, because we have this affinity with storytelling. So when you come across a book that promises to both help you escape and entertain you like a good story will, but at the same time simultaneously teach you something, but not force it down your throat, rather than just kind of edge you towards so you can relate it in your own terms. I mean, what isn't to like about that?
Yeah, that just becomes, it really allows you to move forward. And I'm kind of curious, is you kind of really talk about, and I think you frame this up some, about that anti-hustle. And why is the hustle culture, which we're all in, and even though we've just come through this pandemic and it's not completely over, but we're getting on the other side of it, is we've really become that hustle culture, and it's so toxic, to everyone. And we've seen what it's like to slow down. But I think what I see is people are going right back to where they were before. And maybe they've made a few changes, but still we're about always hustling and kind of that toxic culture that is there. So when you talk about that, why is the hustle culture so toxic in this moment, you think?
It touched upon something that we just talked about, this idea of the books that you feel you need to read, the person you feel you need to be, the people you feel you need to follow, the mask and the hat that you feel you need to wear. That's what it comes down to. A lot of times people will go to hustle and they'll think it's about side hustles. They'll think it's about working 70, 80, 90-hour work weeks. That's a toxic part of it, don't get me wrong. And sometimes you need to do that kind of things to kind of build momentum. But a lot of the times it's just, it's backwards, it's burnout, it's not good. But for me, the real toxic nature of the hustle in today's world is this constantly being connected to the online world and therefore constantly connected to others. Most of us right now, like you're probably watching or reading, listening to this, and you will either have a phone, a tablet, or a laptop within reach. And you might be doing it right now, listening to this, but scrolling through your emails, scrolling through an article, distracting yourself with other things. We're constantly connected. There's always that temptation to be doing two things at once. We might be switched off for the day and don't have any work, but we're still thinking about work. But because it's no longer at the office, we can just pick up our phone and check our emails. Not because we're going to do anything with it, but just because we can. So therefore, we're just switching on to work a little bit more than we need to. Through social media, we're constantly following other people, whether they're thought leaders, our friends, whatever else. And every time that we do, we're comparing ourselves to them. We're comparing our smile to their smile. We're comparing our body to their body. We're comparing the car they drive to the car we drive, their house to our house, their lifestyle to our lifestyle. Constantly connected to our work, constantly connected to information, constantly connected to consumption, and constantly connected to others. And when we're doing all that, we're comparing what we're doing versus what they're doing, what we're doing versus what we could be doing. And that's the true toxic nature of the hustle. We never switch off. Even when we get the ability to switch off, to slow down, we struggle. I mean, I encourage anyone to just try this in the next day or so. Like, put yourself in a room and have the temptation there. So have it be a room where the laptop's there, your phone is there, the TV is there, a book is there, but just switch everything off and just sit in silence for 10 minutes. It sounds easy. It is so hard. You'll find yourself having conversations with yourself to distract yourself. You'll find yourself tempted to look at your phone because it's habitual. You'll find yourself tempted to read a book or to do something because we find it so hard to do nothing, to just sit and enjoy the sound of silence. And it's because we are bombarded with everything all the time. We're bombarded by all these messages, all these things that we could be doing. And that's the true toxic nature of a hustle. It stops us from really kind of thinking about what's going on inside us. It stops us from asking, what does success mean to me? So we end up following another version of success. It tricks us into thinking we haven't achieved our goals, even though we may have achieved our goals and we may be in a much better place than we were this time last year. But because we're constantly comparing ourselves to someone else, we're like, I'm not good enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not where I need to be. I'm not the person I should be. And that is the true toxic nature of the hustle.
That is so true. I mean, because we don't slow it down enough. I mean, you're talking just about 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
Taking some time for yourself and giving yourself that space. I mean, and most people, you can talk to them about meditation. I've done some studying on positive intelligence. And the whole thing is, it's just about slowing yourself down. And then what it actually helps you do is speed yourself up. Because what I do before I do a podcast like this, I always take 2 minutes. And I take 2 minutes, and it's only 2 minutes, but I slow myself down because I want to be present during the podcast. So I'm hearing what you're hearing versus thinking what I've got to do next, what's going on, or thinking about my next question that I need to ask because I've got to keep the podcast moving. How do you slow yourself down? And I think that's
so hard.
Yeah, it's very hard.
It's really hard. And we can put it in our diary and like, okay, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk, and trick yourself into thinking I'm taking some me time and I'm going to be mindful. But then you might spend the entire 30 minutes like looking at your phone or listening to a podcast or an audiobook or having these pointless little conversations in your head where you're like tricking yourself into thinking you're not good enough or thinking about work. So you're not really being present, even though you've booked being present in your calendar.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to escape. But yeah, like you say, just as little as 2 minutes can go a long way. It really can.
Yeah. Is there any other suggestions? I mean, you're talking about slowing down, being present, giving yourself that time to escaping the hustle. Other things that you would suggest or share with the audience?
Well, I think one of the big things, and it's ultimately what I hoped people would take from the Beyond the Pale, is to just take a step back and like reflect and be like, okay, what does success mean to me? Like, what is the journey that I'm on? Like, what is my purpose? Am I scratching the surface or am I going a mile deep? Is that, whether that's with your relationship, whether that's with your personal health, whether that's with your family, whether that's with your business and who you serve, it's all about going a mile deep. It's all about having significance. It's all about quality over quantity. So for me, it all starts by just being like where am I currently? You know, like what is my definition of success? And most people don't know. They have an idea of what it is, but they can't specify it. And usually when they peel away a few layers of that onion, they realize that it was actually a version of success passed down to them from their parents and for society or from the education system or whatever else, or just the constant comparison to the people that they follow online. When you actually take the time to define what success means to you, you may realize you're going in a complete wrong direction, or you may realize you're much closer than you think. You may realize you've already arrived and you are actually allowed to enjoy where you are a lot more than you thought you were, because you are, by all definitions, to yourself, successful. So that's really important. Beyond that, it's just giving yourself as little as 5 minutes each time to focus on your mind, your body, and your spirit. So for me, in mind, it's reading for the sake of reading. Like I say, picking up a good book, you know, not one that's going to teach you, one that's just going to allow you to be. And if that's like sci-fi, fantasy, do you, man, do you. Give yourself 5 minutes to work this mind of yours. 5 minutes of body, exercise, go for a walk, clear your head. 5 minutes of spirit, of soul, whether that's meditation, journaling, going for a walk, you know, combining the two, walking and spirit all in one. Go for a walk, but observe what's going on around you. Like taking a tree, actually look at a tree and be like, bloody hell, a tree is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, look what goes into the creation of a tree. Look what's surrounding that tree. Actually observe what's going on around you. Just doing that just helps you escape from the hustle. It just helps you escape from everything. And more importantly, it helps you to escape inside of you. Let that inner voice to come out a little bit, have a bit of a say for once, and you start honing in on the questions you need to ask. And once you start asking the right questions, you can figure out the answers.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. And what a great time to do it is we're in fourth quarter, because then it's about what can you put in place, but start looking at it now and asking yourself that question. I've said before, you know, you could ask 100 entrepreneurs, what is success? You can ask 100 people, what is success? And you're going to have 100 different answers. Yeah, you can look up a definition, but it's what it is for you. And I love what you said. But too many of us start chasing someone else's success because we started following them and they have that bigger car or they have something else. And then we think we need that. And it's just about slowing down, journaling what you want. And I really love this philosophy of asking yourself a question. I have people ask me all the time about journaling and they say, oh, I just can't do that. And I said, all you got to do is ask yourself one question each day and journal on that answer. That's
might be short, might be long. Yeah. And it's a practice. Journaling's a practice, but this from a high level's a practice. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't expect answers. Being the fact that we're in 4 quarters, perfect. Look at what you're doing in the initial thing. It's like stretching before you're going for a long run.
Yeah.
You know, start small. Just stretch. Let those ideas marinate. If you do that now, by the time you get into 2022, you'll be ready to start that jog. Pick up the pace as you move into quarter 2. You know? Start running that race.
I'm going to start in January. It's so
like
silly. I hate when people say it. Start now, start small.
Start stretching. Think about that success. Think about what it means to you. Think about the direction you're going in now. And if you can make a few steps between now and January, you're going to be in a better position come January.
Yeah. I have one more question I have to ask before we have to get on to the recharge round. As you've done those interviews, I know probably a common theme is something that we've touched on, but what's something that really surprised you or was a big takeaway for you as you did those interviews?
How common self-sabotage is. I think we all think that when we come across pain, whether it's business failure, personal failure, burnout, divorce, whatever, it's like outside factors. But what I noticed time and time again, a lot of people would be sharing about their mistakes and failures, and it was down to them. Self-sabotage. They look back in hindsight now and realize they were like sabotaging their business, their relationship, their body, like for weeks, months, maybe even years before the fact. And a part of them was conscious of it. And a part of them was kind of wanting it because they knew they were doing the wrong thing. So yeah, self-sabotage is just so common. And I think we're all guilty of it. And sometimes we do it because we don't feel like we deserve what we have. Oftentimes, though, it's that inner voice trying to tell you, like, you may seemingly have it all, like the riches, the lifestyle, but this isn't what you want. And it comes back to that idea of success. They've reached another person's version of success, not their own. And it's like this inner voice, self-sabotaging, going, this isn't what you need to be doing. So yeah, I came across self-sabotage far more than I ever thought I would.
Okay. Well, I truly appreciate you sharing that. And I could see that because, of course, if you haven't defined what success is to you, that creates part of it. So it goes right back to our conversation. This is one of those chargers I call my listeners chargers, is you probably need to go back and listen to again, because Matthew really shared a secret with you that really doesn't have to be a secret, but it seems like it's more of a secret of slowing down, asking yourself the questions, and spending some time reflecting on that. I just think it's a great time to be able to do that. Let's get them in the mode, because I think one way they can do it, and I told you I've not been able to read your book yet, but I'm going to be reading it real soon. Share with them how they could get a copy of the book and give them the name and everything, and then we'll jump into the recharge round, Matthew.
Well, first of all, if you're watching, make sure to get this cover locked in your mind. So if you see it in a bookstore or across Amazon, there you go. Get it. Get a copy for your friends. That's how the love spreads. But you can learn all about the book at beyondbook.co. So that's beyondbook.co. And there's links there on how you can get it on places like Amazon. You can also download a free sample, and there's links to like my Instagram and Facebook and a free Facebook group. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me, just follow me on whatever your platform of choice is, and yeah, reach out.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. And we'll, of course, have it in show notes. So if you are doing multiple things right now that we know most people are, in chargepodcast.com, we've got a quick, easy link to be able to get right to Matthew's book. So please check it out. Matthew, I've got 3 questions I ask every guest. They're called the recharge round. The first one is kind of a mantra. It's the name of the podcast, Charge, but it has a reason behind it. Create habits around real goals every day. Share with us your habit that you do that's really gained success you feel in your life.
Something which I haven't been doing as much recently and need to get back into, we've already mentioned it, journaling. But journaling not for any point other than just to sit down. I usually will just spend 5 minutes like looking outside the window early on in the morning, and then just see what kind of springs into my mind. Or maybe I'll listen to a bit of music, let my mind wander, and just write a little bit of something down. A lot of times it's much to do with nothing, but it's amazing what little nuggets kind of come from that. Questions kind of unravel from that as the day goes on. So yeah, journaling for me is something I need to do more of again, because it centers me, it helps me reflect, but it just also lets what's in out.
Well, my next question for you is a simple positive action. I call it SPA. I like acronyms, I've found out, but a simple positive action that you do each day to help you move forward to achieve the goals that you're working on.
Walk. Yeah. And again, wherever possible, walking for no sake other than to walk, just enjoy it. Just take it in, take in the surroundings, let yourself breathe.
Truly seeing it. And so that becomes a great one. How about your biggest life lesson? What did you learn from it?
Honestly, it was defining success, realizing what really matters. That allowed me to kind of like tap into the whole hustle culture and my relationship with the hustle, which in turn allowed me to start working less. And in working less, I started to earn more. I started to achieve more. I started to create more worth. So yeah, defining success on my terms allowed me to see life in a new light. And once you see life in a new light like that, you can really start living.
Excellent. Well, I truly appreciate your time today, Matthew. It's been a great conversation. Can't wait to check out the book Beyond the Pale by Matthew Turner. We're going to have it in show notes, but share them again one more time. If they want to go to check out and get the information, where can they go?
Beyondbook.co.
So please check it out. It's in any of the areas there. Get yourself a copy. Matthew's also on Facebook. He's on Instagram, LinkedIn. So you can reach out to him in any of those areas. And please do, Chargers. And I think you'll really enjoy the book. And the one thing I want to really stress is, you and I have talked a little bit offline. You may think, okay, you said that's a book for entrepreneurs or kind of some of the history. The thing is, it'll fit anyone, because you'll be able to put yourself in this story. And knowing Matthew just a short amount of time that we've been able to talk, I know he's really written it from where really the whole thing about a fable is you can put yourself in that fable and realize some of the things you need to change in your life, or you want to start doing.
Absolutely. It's been a great journey, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Well, thank you, Matthew, again for being on the Charge podcast. We're so glad to have you. Chargers, I would appreciate you to do one thing for me. Go out right now and remember those 3 little dots on your little podcast app that you're listening to is on your phone. You can share this. So go ahead and share this podcast with 3 of your friends that you know needs to hear this message. Maybe they're in the hustle, and maybe they just need to really give themselves some time and space. Well, you've probably told them this, but the only problem is when you're a good friend, we tend not to listen to those people as well. So instead, maybe let Matthew, and the way he shared it through our conversation, to be able to share that message with them. So if you would do that, we'd truly appreciate it. Remember, come back next week and we'll have another great guest for you as we continue on here, because it's hard to believe, but we're getting at the end of 2021. So make it a great day and go out and charge. Create habits around real goals every day. See you soon, Chargers.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.